Hey guys, on this week's episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast, we have changed it up a little bit and decided to go over our backgrounds. We talk about the music we grew up on from our parents and then our first exposure to this scene. Josh and I talk about how we used to have to hide our music from our parents, and while we were hiding our music, Kyle's mom was taking everyone to shows. We talk about some of our first experiences together, including Kyle and I playing pool together while listening to music and guessing band and song names in his basement. Kyle and Josh being in auto class together, and my first memory of Josh putting extensions in his bangs to probably have the most scene look possible. To get to know us on this week's episode of the podcast, and let's open this pit up.
Somebody hit somebody!
What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast. I'm Trevor. I'm here with Kyle and Josh, and this week we're going to spend a little time getting to know us, talking about our backgrounds. But to get things kicked off, Kyle had a run-in with the Popo.
I did. I got pulled over today. I was doing 90 and a 65. Just kidding. Shout out to Akon. I was speeding, though, and he pulled me over. And look, I'm not mad. Well, I'm mad that he pulled me over, but he was right, okay? I was speeding. What bugs me the most is if you've ever been down to Texas, there's way worse things on the road than what I was doing. And that's what bugs me. It's like 2 cars ahead of me, there's a guy like with his bumper just dragging on the ground. Not even like attached, like it's just hanging off and like sparks are flying up. And it's like, you pulled me over for going a little over the speed limit? Give me a break.
I'm pretty sure the last time I got pulled over was actually with Josh driving home from an Icy Stars concert from Idaho. This was 13 years ago, 14 years ago, somewhere in that range.
About 2010.
Yeah, so 13 years ago. That was the last time, and dude, we were cruising, man. It's like a 4-hour drive. We were going to be home in 2. And there was no one on the road, and every time I saw brake lights, I always slowed down to 65, but we were like 45 minutes away. I'm like, screw it. We're just going. Brake lights. Guess who's right in front of me?
And you were driving then?
Yeah. And
He was driving.
I've been in the car with Josh a lot of times.
Bicycle.
I've been in the car with Josh a lot of times, and I'm shocked that we never got pulled over because you were not a good driver, dude.
I have a few funny ones. I got pulled over one time with one of my buddies, and he was wearing one of those glasses with the nose and the mustache mask, and like he wouldn't take it off. And so the cop was like, "Have you guys been drinking?" And he just starts laughing. And I'm looking at him, and I start laughing. I'm like, "No, I just drive like an idiot. I'm sorry. I was swerving all over. We're just doing stupid stuff."
Did you still have that? What was that car you used to drive in high school?
It was a 1988 Lincoln Town Car.
Yeah. Do you remember that? I can't remember. I think we were going to a show, and you were driving, and you got off the off-ramp on the freeway, but you were still doing like 80. Do you remember that? And we were like screaming, and you were slamming on your brakes. Yeah, I was scared every time I got in the car with you.
the worst was driving through the high school parking lot when it was snowing with Josh, because he would whip the corners and slide into parking spots.
I had that parking lot like down to a T. When I slid my parents' Suburban right in that parking stall like it was meant to be.
Oh my gosh. Good stuff.
I got pulled over one time in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a weekend trip, so it was a long drive there, long drive back with one of my buddies. And down there, they can take photos of you. So they don't even have to pull you over. It's just like one of those picture deals. So a couple weeks later in the mail, I get this thing from Phoenix, Arizona. And it's like right there. I'm reading the thing. "We caught you speeding, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh, I can fight this ticket." And behind it is a clear picture of me with my shirt off. And I look so mad while I'm driving because I was so tired. And it's clearly me driving, speeding in the left-hand lane. It was like 20 over. The ticket was like $260. It was astronomical.
Oh, yeah, my gosh.
Speeding tickets are expensive.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Well, good stuff. And go take your driver's ed course, Kyle. Get out of that thing.
Nah, yeah, I'm just going to go pay it. But, all right. I'm not arguing with that one. So,
but then, Josh, you went to a show on Monday, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was Momentum. It had 2 local bands, Zodiac Killer and Service Weapon. It was cool. So it was a one-off show for Momentum. They're on tour right now with Orthodox and Chamber. which I'm pretty bummed that those two bands didn't come through. Both those bands are super sick. That whole bill is super sick. If that comes through your town, go check it out. But
Yeah, Chamber just dropped a new album, right?
yes,
I saw the music video from one of their songs, and it's like, the song's heavy when the drummer already doesn't have a shirt on.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And Orthodox has a side project. I think it's the vocalist or guitarist, whatever, is in a band called the Dozen Black Roses. But they're all from like the Nashville area, so I think that's pretty cool.
Orthodox is going to be on Stick to Your Guns and Comeback Kid coming
Right?
through.
and with Spirit World. Have you guys listened to Spirit World?
Yeah,
They're
I
sweet.
haven't.
No, they're sweet.
That's
Have
going to
you
be a
guys-
sick show.
Have you guys listened to Orthodox?
Mm-mm.
Not really.
You
I'll check
you
them
should.
out.
It's kind of not as sporadic, like I say, of like the Chariot or something like that, but it's kind of like towards that realm of not traditional metal hardcore. So it's kind of interesting. But
Nice.
yeah, the show was awesome for DIY hardcore shows. They've changed drastically from 2020. It seemed like after the pandemic, it was like 100 to 200 new kids, new faces I've never seen before. All of a sudden, just decided, yeah, we're coming to shows, and they're like tattooed from the neck down. So like, it's weird because to see new kids at shows, you usually see them when they're young. They're like still in high school, like kind of like how we were in like 2007, 2008. And no, they're just like, oh no, we're obviously well adults because they're all tattooed, but I don't recognize any of them. So I'm like, and I've been going to shows like that for the last 17 years. So it's interesting. It was at this place called the Sewing Factory. It's weird because like I was asking the guys that put the show on, I'm like, how did you land this place? They're like, oh, one of our buddies cuts this kid's hair, and this is his uncle's shop, and it just kind of worked out. So the kids that are like, I should say kids, guys that are like older, are in the shop next door looking at all the hot rods because they do upholstery for old cars.
Oh, sick.
They got like an old VW van. They've got a hot rod and just like Chevy Novas and just stuff. And we're like all looking at that stuff while everybody else is moshing. It was crazy hot. They had like the Home Depot fans. They had some swamp coolers, and it like didn't do anything but make it worse. But there had to have been probably at least 100 kids inside and probably the same amount outside.
Was it like a garage door open? Like, could you be outside and see in, or they were just hanging out?
So there was a garage door, but they would keep it closed while the bands were playing. I assume just to like not bring too much more attention that there already was. But it was cool. Like everyone respected the venue, respected like who put the show on. No fights, nothing got broken. It was just good fun and a good diversity of friends and people that aren't necessarily friends, but everyone got along great. It was awesome.
There's a lot of really cool tours that are starting to line up for kind of the fall time. We just mentioned the Stick to Your Guns Comeback Kid show. No Bragging Rights is going to be out here soon. In the metalcore realm that we're talking about is the Devil Wears Prada, Fit for a King, Counterparts. There's tons of shows coming up. So what are you guys looking forward to kind of going and seeing here soon?
Yeah, so the No Bragging Rights one for sure. I always go out and go hard for those guys. Stick to Your Guns will be cool. I also think the Wonder Years and Anxious, Action Adventure, and Sweet Pill, that tour is going to be pretty cool. They're coming down to Texas in September, so I'm going to catch that one. A couple other cool ones is Angel Dust. I don't know if you guys have listened much to them. They're pretty sweet. They're going to be touring this fall. And Scowl is playing as well with Military Gun. They're doing a tour, so I might try and check that one out too. So I'm going to be broke this fall because there's sweet tours coming around.
I probably won't go to this show, but one I saw got announced was Motionless in White is touring with Knock Loose.
That'd be cool.
I think I mentioned that on the last podcast, but it's funny. One of my sisters is planning on going. She's a huge fan of Motionless in White, so now I'm kind of halfway torn. Like maybe I need to go to make sure she doesn't die during Knock Loose. I can totally see that happening and have that somehow be my fault. One show that's coming here on August 6th, that's a Sunday, right? Is Yellow Card is doing their Ocean Avenue tour. It's a 20-year anniversary, which is another huge nostalgic record in general that I grew up on. I could probably sing that record front to back. that's going to be a really cool one to see. Not in my setting of a venue. It's at USANA where they have chairs and stuff. But at the same time, I don't know if that's necessarily a band I really want to be really involved in the moshing or whatever too. So sitting down might not be such a bad idea.
I mean, are Yellow Card fans like young enough to mosh still?
No way.
I would, if I go see that, I'd prefer sitting down with that one. It's like,
I don't know, man. Their new single they just put out with the Pierce the Veil guy, that was a pretty legit single. It would have been fun to see them in more closed off venue kind of thing, standing up. I think it'd be fun to see them like that.
They released the whole EP. I don't know if you were able to catch that.
I haven't listened to the whole EP yet. I just listened to the one single. My wife claimed to have known who Pierce the Veil was. I made fun of her because I said there's no way she knows who Pierce the Veil is. And we sat there for about 10 minutes while she scrolled through songs. Sure, she could find one. She did not find a Pierce the Veil song she knew.
There was a kid in high school that's super rude, but we used to make up fake band names and like go tell him about them. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that band." And I'm like, "Oh, you haven't." But yeah, they're touring with was it Story of the Year, Mayday Parade, Amberlin, This Wildlife, and then that emo something
like emo night.
Emo night. I don't even know what that is.
It's a DJ that just literally goes in and just plays emo anthems. It'd be fun for like a dance club setting. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm going to go sit at USANA on the grass just to listen to a guy play emo songs over the radio.
My wife's like always trying to get me to go dancing and stuff. It's like, all right, I'll go see this guy for rocking like Hawthorne Heights and like a dubstep version. Like, let's do it.
So the grass seats are sold out. Yeah, so it's actual seats now. So that's why I was like, so Story of the Year isn't playing this date, which is a huge bummer. But if they were playing this date, I would find a way to jump off that stage. Were you guys able to catch any of the videos from the Utah is for Lovers Fest?
No.
It's funny. There's a lot of friends from the hardcore scene that actually went. I'll be honest, it kind of looked like a bust. It didn't look very packed at all.
I was talking to one of our friends about that venue because it's a newer venue that they're trying to set up for these kind of revolving
fests or whatever.
Fests coming through, yeah. And he said it's not big enough to really be like a festival venue. Like really, max capacity might be 400 people, 500 people, and there's no parking. On top of that, it was one of the hottest days that Utah's had this year. And so like I actually hopped on to like look for tickets to see if maybe I could grab a $20 ticket to go see 4 Year Alkaline right at the end, and couldn't find tickets for it. I think a lot of people bought tickets and just didn't go.
Yeah, I looked when the videos I saw, it looked like there was a lot of space between people. So if it was sold out, maybe they limited the amount of tickets they could sell. I don't know. So it's funny. Like I feel like for festivals, I guess it depends on how you stack the festival, how many bands you want. But like the last year that Warped Tour came through here, they held it at USANA, and the parking lot of USANA was where they had all the other stages. And so it was the same problem. There was no parking off of that busy highway Mountain View corridor. There's no coverage. There's no shade. There's nothing. Like, it was a huge bummer because the last best place ever was Utah State Fair Park. There were so many places to go.
Oh, yeah.
Hide in the shade, different stages. And then that way, if you had to throw somebody on the ground, usually it was on grass, so like you didn't feel too bad. Not concrete. Do you guys ever remember?
I watched some guys go limp hitting that ground.
Do you guys ever like how terrifying it was to mosh for like your favorite band on concrete though, or asphalt?
I remember watching Every Time I Die at Warped Tour, and it was over the asphalt, and it was absolutely terrifying.
It was nice though because you could like actually grip your shoes.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I was slipping and stuff the whole time, but yeah, falling on that, not good.
Yeah, like depending on how thick the pit was, like you might get some like asphalt, burn on you. But yeah, I mean the ground itself was pretty rough. I always hated the one guy in the mosh pit that was overly sweaty and just like you would go to like push him off of you and like he just
your hands would slip.
You like slipped down him and face plant into him.
Yeah, it was like sticking your hand in a pack of wet hot dogs.
That's like the most perfect example of it, honestly, though. That fits so well because it really is.
It's
That's
so gross.
nasty.
You're just like, yeah.
But yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, lots of cool tours coming. I'm excited. I think that I'll be hitting up quite a few over the next couple of months. It seems like August, September, and October. There's probably about 5 shows that I want to go see. So
Yeah,
lots of
I
stuff
know.
coming through.
I know down here, No Bragging Rights plays on the 18th, and then the Wonder Years is on the 19th. So I'll be at my old age attempting back to backs, man. I haven't done that in a real long time. So
2 old New York hardcore bands that just got announced the other day. It's Sheer Terror and Slapshot. Probably like way before, well, it's way before like even our time. This is like 90s, but that's a show. If you can make it out to that, if you're into hardcore, that's like a nostalgia hardcore type band that you would want to go see, because those bands from New York do not come out here that often,
Yeah.
and the probability of them coming out ever again is not likely.
When are those shows? And is it Utah and Texas, or is it just Utah right now?
No, so it's just Utah. It's a small tour. The dates that I have are in September, the 26th or the 29th, and they're playing Seattle, Portland, Boise, and Salt Lake. I think there's a few more dates. This is just what I can see. But it's with bands Slapshot, Sheer Terror, and Skullcrack. I know there's been plenty of people that when Slapshot and Sheer Terror play back in New York, people will fly from here to fly out there to go see them. So that the fact that they're coming here, because there's a lot of people that can't afford to do that, I think that show is going to be overly packed with a bunch of like 45-year-old dudes that are ready to throw down one more time.
the
Nice.
true meaning of coming out of Mosh retirement.
You know, the Stick to Your Guns and Comeback Kid show is at Kilby. So
That would be really fun to go to.
Dude,
Yeah.
I saw this comment online that was like, bald guys in their 30s are getting real excited for this tour. And I'm like, dang it. That's like a direct attack on me, man.
So that makes me want to go see that show, because Stick to Your Guns is a much bigger band now.
Well, they're playing the Diamond album front to back,
Are they?
which that album
Same
slaps,
with,
dude.
same with Comeback Kid, and it's cool because like they say, the first time I ever listened to Stick to Your Guns or got to see them was in that venue in Woods Cross below the Spanky's sandwich shop.
nice.
It was Stick to Your Guns and Suicide Silence, and I thought that place was going to burn in half.
Dude, I remember seeing them with, what was that first album? Comes from the not their first album, but it Comes from the Heart. I can't remember what tour that was on, but when they start singing the like "We're what separates the heart from the heartless," it's like
Yes.
someone's about to die. It was so good.
Comeback Kid will be cool to see in that small of a venue too, because Comeback Kid gets put on a lot of bigger tours, and they're usually stuck between a barrier, like a really tall stage, things like that. And since club sound and in the venue, the 2 very popular venues in Salt Lake for generations, is no longer a thing, it'd be really cool to see them at Kilby Courts when they start playing Wake the Dead. It's probably going to get swarmed all the way up to the roof.
The one other show that I might try to catch is Parkway's coming through, but they're with the Amity Affliction. I haven't seen those guys, and I don't know if they're starting to wind down. It feels like a little bit. They went on a little bit of a hiatus and then came back, and coming back from Australia, I don't know if they'll be back that much anymore. So I might try to catch that one.
You're talking about Parkway?
No, Amity Affliction.
I mean, I recognize the name, and I'm sure I've heard them, but I couldn't tell you a song by them.
I thought their first album was pretty cool, and then it just all kind of mixed in, blended in. But
I mean, for sure. But again, it's just more for the fact that it's probably one of those bands that you're probably not going to see. So try to catch them live.
shoot, you could say that about Parkway too, man. Those guys got to be getting up there.
20 years this year. It started 2003. They're putting out kind of a 20-year remembrance thing from when they started. If you start looking on their Twitter and stuff like that, I think they're going to release a little bit of a video. But their tours are looking sick.
Yeah, I saw clips of them play, and they still play old stuff. And I respect, because like I'm not a huge fan of their new stuff, but
I don't know if they're playing anything off of
like
Killing with a Smile, but they are playing. They're playing Horizons for sure.
Well, if they brought back Killing with a Smile, then
Did you guys ever watch their DVD
yeah,
after they released? I think it was between Horizons and Killing with a Smile. They came out with like a DVD.
There's
Was
like
it that or between that and
thing.
Deep Blue?
Was it?
Horizons and Deep Blue, yeah.
Maybe it was just after Horizons. Maybe it was released
Yeah.
with Horizons. I can't remember. But the DVD was cool because it's from what I remember, it sounds like the whole reason that band was started is because they wanted to go surf all the different coasts around Australia. Let's start a band to help pay to go surf. I'm kind of vague on that, but that's what I remember.
It makes sense because I feel like I've seen clips of them playing on like flip flops.
Yeah, so like the drummer could just drum really fast, but if you see old pictures of him, he looks like a surf boy. You know,
They're all surf dudes for sure.
Yeah, and I think there was a period in time that they actually were in Europe for a couple months because they didn't have enough money to get home. So they just kind of just played shows. But they did like a comparison from like a first show they ever did there, and there's like 10 kids there. And then a year later, it's completely packed front to back.
Dude, I love Parkway.
Yeah, they're cool.
Just
They're one of
cool.
my favorite. But cool. So this week, like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, we're just going to talk about kind of who we are and our backgrounds and stuff like that. What I really wanted to kind of get into is what music did you guys listen to kind of growing up? What were some of the first alternative bands that you guys listened to? And then do you guys remember like the first record that you kind of bought in this scene and kind of what that progression for your stuff? Maybe start with Josh. Where did you like start growing up? Like what was the stuff your parents listened to?
I was born in West Valley. I grew up in Farmington from 96 on. And my parents came from the backgrounds of like my dad came from Sugar House and my mom came from a small town called Mint Creek, Idaho, just about 20 miles outside of Preston. So just farm country. The background that I had in music, a lot of it's strained from my dad because he played guitar growing up, played in like rock bands. I mean, to him, his dad thought that the Beatles was devil music, you know? So to him, that was hard rock. So for my dad's side, a lot of it was Beatle influenced bands like Bad Company, Foreigner, Pink Floyd, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, kind of just that modern, like generic hard rock that you can think of. I mean, to this day, we go eat at any hard rock cafe if we're near one, and he gets a shirt. He just needs that dude, you know. I picked up a lot of music traits from that, especially into my writing. And then for my mom, she kind of had two variables. So like as far as the countryside in her, she was like way into country, like Chet Atkins, Reba McEntire, Shania Twain. I don't know country that well, but it like estranged from that. But then she also had another side to her. She called it her. She would need to repent if she listened to it music. She listened to like AC/DC and Kiss were like her two things. So like growing up, if either one of those bands were playing in the house, you had to leave because you knew she was mad. But as far as a background of music, that's kind of how I came up. So a lot of my first records were bought by my parents, you know, when you got a CD player for Christmas, and that's kind of the direction they wanted. I don't think it's the direction they wanted me to go. I think that's just like what they knew.
I gotcha. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, you know, half that stuff, it's like, Josh, did we have the same parents outside of the country thing? But my dad played in a band too growing up, big into, you know, rock, 60s, 70s rock. My mom, not as much into like 60s and 70s rock, but more like Pink Floyd, lots of hair metal. I think even now, like one of her favorite bands is like Dragon Force. And she like went and saw Dragon Force and brought me with her. And I just remember her like trying to flirt with the band members and stuff, and which was really weird. But I grew up with a really, you know, cool appreciation for music. My dad took me to a lot of concerts. Like I've been lucky enough to see Rush. I've seen Jethro Tull, kind of a well-known guy from the 60s, but he plays the flute.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like trying to not fall asleep because it was really late, and watching this like weird old man play the flute up on stage with rock music. I was like, this is so strange. But looking back, like I really appreciate it. But my older brother is the one that kind of introduced me more into the music that we listen to now. I came into this scene more from the punk side. You know, I had all the like Rancid albums, you know, Black Flag, NoFX, MXPX. You know, I grew up on a lot of the more punk stuff with my older brother, and he's 4 years older than me. So I always, you know, tried to be the cool little brother to get him to take me to shows and stuff. I remember going to, I don't remember how old I was, but he took me to Kilby Court this little tiny venue in Salt Lake City, and I saw this local band called Day 2. And it was like one of the first bands I'd seen or heard that like actually screamed like that in music. And it was just like this revelation of, and seeing how people mosh to it and stuff. And I was like, this is amazing, you know?
Right.
And so that was kind of my introduction more into heavier music, because prior to that, it'd been more punk focused. The first concert I ever went to was Tiger Army, which was awesome. Seeing all the rockabilly people. And that was a shocker, you know, being a young kid and seeing all these guys with tattoos, but then like slick back hair and, you know, like straight out of like the 50s and stuff. And then the bass player for Tiger Army is up on stage standing on top of his, you know, stand-up bass and playing it. And but that's kind of where my background and my history came from with music. And, you know, I really appreciate the fact that my parents got me into music that felt real, felt emotional, that had a good message, because that has stuck with me into adulthood, you know, and I'm trying to teach that to my kids too.
Nice. For me, I don't even know if I could really describe what my dad's taste in music was growing up, because we listened to everything. I remember listening to like Brian Seltzer and that kind of stuff, and then Supertramp. And then as like things progressed, like Bare Naked Ladies was something that we always kind of had on, like that kind of just in the like mainstream rock vein. But his background, he had older brothers and stuff like that, so he was into the heavy rock stuff, hair metal bands. Kiss was something that they were always playing and things like that, and he would steal his older brother's records, AC/DC, all that kind of good stuff. And then my mom, apparently moms are country, right? Like that's just what they are.
Except for my mom. My mom says country causes brain damage. So
Truth to that.
A lot of what we listened to was country growing up, just because that is what was put on the weekends when we were doing our chores and stuff like that. And so my first records, kind of like Josh, I think my very first one was Alan Jackson. I had the Alan Jackson record, and then Garth Brooks, that was one of my records, and Faith Hill. Those were my 3 country albums that I grew up listening to. Yeah, so that's kind of where it all started. But when I was about 8 years old, I have a cousin. He's actually a foster cousin, but he would come and sleep over, and he had an older brother who had introduced him to a lot of punk bands kind of thing. And so he would put me Less Than Jake, Newfound Glory, MXPX, those kind of bands. He would just hand me a CD, and he would be sitting there playing Mega Man, and I'd be listening to Less Than Jake, All My Friends Are Metalheads, or Newfound Glory, Hit and Miss. I think it's so hard to describe to anyone who's younger than us how difficult it was to remember band names and song names if it was a burned CD. You didn't know who you were listening to or anything like that. All you knew is the lyrics that you heard. So there was about 6-7 years where I knew all the lyrics to Hit and Miss by Newfound Glory. I couldn't tell you who the band was or what the song was. And then one day, all of a sudden, I had another cousin who put the record in. I'm like, I've been looking for this record for like 6 years. Who is this? And it's like Newfound Glory, Hit and Miss. And I was like, all right. So that was kind of my introduction and where I started with everything, but it all progressed from there. And Kyle, you started to get into it where you went and saw Day 2, but Josh, like where was like the first hardcore introduction for you, or first punk vein that kind of, and where did that go?
I think, you know, it's funny how things progress. And I think a lot of it had to do with how I was raised. So like I was raised in a Mormon family. I was raised with a lot of restrictions. So like I could have a CD, but my mom had to like buy it. She had to pre-listen to it. Regardless if I had a parental advisory sticker on it or not, she had to read all the lyrics. And if she felt like it wasn't like to her standard, I couldn't have it. So there were a lot of bands that I couldn't really listen to until I was later, even in like movies. I've never seen any of the Ace Venturas. I just like missed that era, the opportunity. My humor's changed so much now that I don't think I can really get into it.
Oh, you could.
It's a shame. I think you could too.
You know
I know your humor. You could.
Even Dumb and Dumber, I didn't see until I was like probably 17, 18. Bizarre things. But anyway, yeah, I think a lot of restrictions kind of kept me from a lot of bands. And until like I started going to school, because then you start making friends that are raised differently, that have different rules, that can actually have the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, that can have CDs that maybe have a parental advisory sticker on it or not. I started kind of following the same wave pattern of like 90s music, like you brought up the Bare Naked Ladies. Sugar Ray was one that like I listened to quite a bit. What's that song?
Uncle Cracker.
Uncle Cracker. What's that song? It's called "Hey Now You're a Rock Star." Who wrote that one? I can't remember the band name.
Smash Mouth.
Smash
Yeah.
Mouth. You know, just your typical 90s just stuff, you know. But anyway, I had one particular friend that came to school with a CD player. He had in the Blink-182 Enema of the State. And like I listened to it over and over and over and over. Then he was like, "Hey, you can have this CD if you want." And I took it, had it for a week. My mom confiscated it, and it was done. So that was a little dabble into the introduction. And then I have a cousin that was actually going to punk shows. And I didn't really understand what any of this meant because I was pretty young. I had to have been like 10. And he was going to shows at like Lo-Fi Cafe and DV8. I know what those are now, but at the time that meant, nothing to me. And he listened to AFI a lot. He had the old albums like Shut Your Mouth and Open Your Eyes, Nice to See You, Black Sails in the Sunset. Right before he was going to move in with his dad down in Louisiana, he was like, "I'm going to burn you not burn you, sorry, that didn't exist yet. I'm going to record some tape decks for you." This same thing. I had them for about a day. My mom confiscated them. They were gone. And she was like, "I can't understand the lyrics. I can't tell what they're saying, so you can't have it." So I was just like, so I never saw the tape again. And by that point, tapes were kind of gone, a thing of the past. And I couldn't remember the band name for years. And so I think the first record I was able to buy, because the other restriction you could go to Target and buy a CD, but if it had the parental advisory sticker on it, you had to pull out your ID card and say that you were 18 or maybe 17. I was 16 years old, so there was a lot of things I couldn't buy either. So I think the first record I actually bought, I would say, kind of started getting into my cross wave of collecting CDs and getting into that, would have been Fall Out Boy's first record.
The Take This to Your Grave?
Yeah. So, because there's like a little dab of screaming, but it's like punky enough, but poppy enough that I get my mom on board, whatever. And then I had a couple other friends from the neighborhood. One friend had the Nickelback Silver Side Up CD. One friend had the Sum 41 Fat Lip CD. And then I had another friend that had the Linkin Park record. Because around that time, all of those bands just dropped these records all at once. And then they were hosting all of these, because I didn't grow up with cable, they were hosting all of these music videos on what was called Channel 58, The Box. You had to set up your antenna perfectly to like kind of get kind of a fuzzy picture, but they played anywhere from like stuff like Bare Naked Ladies to like Eminem and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube to like Sum 41 or the Dixie Chicks or MXPX. Nice. And that was when I started filtering and putting the band names with the faces with the song and going, I really like this stuff.
Yeah.
But you'd have to watch Channel 58 middle of the night while your parents were asleep, because as soon as she found out, like, my TV was gone.
Yep.
It's a good thing you landed on this channel at the middle of the night. We might be having a different conversation.
Right?
I mean, it's Utah, right? The music videos are as raunchy as it gets here. So
I think my first dabble in a hardcore show, like you were saying that you got to see Jethro Tull. So my only experience was shows up until this point. I got to see Eric Clapton twice. And then later on, I got to see Paul McCartney and I got to see Billy Joel.
Nice.
Yeah.
But up to that point, it was like you show up, you present your ticket, you go get like your drink, and then you go sit in a seat in a giant stadium and you listen to some songs. Well, so when I got to junior high, towards the end of junior high, I had made a friend. He was like, "Hey, there's some local bands playing a park show tonight." Because at that time, when you were 15 years old, you could get your parents to let you drive the car or find somebody to drive the car to the park from the neighborhood to play a show. And the bands I remember seeing was a band called Rosetta, a band called Crosscheck, and a band called Kentucky Scandal. And they were all from Davis High. So kind of to think about that now, there were 3 local bands from the same high school is kind of weird. And like, they weren't bad either. They're actually all really good. Crosscheck, they had their name up there as X, Crosscheck X. And that was kind of my introduction to straight edge but I didn't quite know what it was. Kind of discovered my own introduction to a mosh pit there, even though it wasn't really much of one. But then that was also my first dabbling in watching people hardcore dance, because I thought people were just swinging to fight. Totally just.
Yeah.
I remember I'm friends with this guy now, but there was a guy huge, call him a Big B, and he's got these massive gauges. Yeah, looked like 2-inch gauges, and I was terrified, And that was kind of my introduction. And then I didn't end up going to a show again until later that year, and it was Thrice Vedera Under Oath of the Blood.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my background, my restrictions were very similar to you. My mom absolutely hates this music with a burning passion. I have not had more arguments and fights with my parents than when it came to music. And, I think that maybe deep down, that's part of the reason why I liked it so much, kind of thing. It was the rebellion. Yeah, no, I remember, like I said, I started in the punk ska scene kind of thing, and then working my way through and made some friends in junior high and stuff. And the big thing for me was Comcast. You used to be able to watch music videos on Comcast.
That's right.
So if my mom's not letting me buy the records, I'm on Comcast and I'm going through, and anywhere where there's the metal, hardcore, rock, I watch them all.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
I think I remember you and one of our other friends watching that Aiden The Last Sunrise video like 30 times.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
I watched that one. I watched hours of music videos. We had one friend who his dad was working all the time, so we just kind of got to run that house kind of thing. And I would sit there while they were playing some MMORPG before World of Warcraft, and I was just sitting there watching music videos for hours on end until his dad got home and kicked us all out of the house kind of thing. But the first record, same thing. I could go to Target and I could buy CDs. I would always have to buy two. I'd have to buy one that was non-conspicuous and one that was one that my mom wouldn't like, and I'd have to hide it when I was walking in. Yeah. I remember the first two I bought Senses Fell, Let It Enfold You, with the guy burning on the cover, which I knew my mom would absolutely murder me with. And then I think I bought, I don't remember. I think it was Rise Against maybe. And Rise Against was actually pretty heavy at the time too, but I could get away with that one because it didn't have a burning guy on the front of it. So that was the one I presented to her. And then I had Senses Fail tucked in the back of my pants or something as I walked down to my room, and then had a little hideaway for all these records that I couldn't listen to.
It's funny though, because like, okay, so take a band like Senses Fail. When you listen to the lyrics really aren't that bad. They're actually kind of whiny. You know what I mean? Like they're good, but like it's just like kind of more emotional stuff. And you're like, like my mom or your mom, you're like, yeah, no, this is just not acceptable. It's got a burning picture on it. I'm like, lady, you literally used to listen to Kiss. Have you ever listened to lyrics of Love Gun?
Yeah,
that's true.
Get real.
But let's be fair, right? Senses Fail's talk about throwing people off the top of roofs and stuff like that. Like, there's some pretty aggressive stuff for a 12-year-old to be listening to. So
Love Gun is about his wiener.
It's all a facade though, Josh. It's all an illusion. Senses Fail. He just says, I'm gonna walk downstairs and smile as I see you hit the concrete. So
I will say,
what side of the coin you're on.
Yeah. I will say that it's interesting hearing you guys tell your experience, because mine with my parents was like the complete opposite. So my dad, when I started showing a lot of this stuff to my dad, he was just like, I don't like the screaming. But what was interesting is he would relate it to when he was a kid. And, Josh, you kind of talked about it, where our grandparents thought that these bands from the 60s and 70s was devil music. But compared to what we listen to now, it's like those are nursery rhymes,
Yep.
And so my dad was like, I don't really like the screaming because I can't understand them. But he's like, I get where you're coming from. And he's like, it's talented. It's cool music. He didn't like it, but he was like, I respect it. And he never had an issue with any of it. And my mom would go to shows with us. My mom's like a diehard, like Dropkick Murphys fan. Like me and her have probably seen Dropkick like 3 or 4 times together. And she would just say, be careful in the pit. But I'd come out, bloodied because I was younger than a lot of the guys in there. And, she would start looking for the guys. Like she was going to start throwing fists with them. but no, like she was a big supporter, and it's just interesting because even bands that like said the F word or were explicit, like I remember, I think I think for a while there, I had the ringtone on my phone from Parkway Drive that was like, so cry me, what's the, I can't remember.
So
I mean-
cry me effing river.
Yeah. I had that as my like ringtone for a while. My mom would just like she'd smack me, be like, "What are you doing?" But she never got mad at me for it. Like didn't care. She never told me to change it. So, and I respected that because it was cool that it gave me the freedom to really explore the music that was interesting to me, and I never felt pressured or.
And it's funny. It's like it's friends like that I made like you growing up made me really question like, why are you like, to my parents, like, why are you being so strict? None of this makes sense. It's like, you understand when you're older, and I'm older and I still don't get it.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I swear that's like 90% of this music anyways was like, I swear half those like punk bands back in the day would sing about, it's AFI, right? That's got the song that I want to get a mohawk, but my mom won't let me. It's like, all you're doing is just pushing me more and more into this,
Yeah. I think things like that are like, you understand when you're older. And I'm like, I just don't think you understand music at all. And that's fine. I don't need you to understand. I just need to just accept that this is what I like.
But see, it's crazy though, because okay, the music might not sound as heavy, but you listen to or read some of the lyrics of these bands that they listened to back in the 60s. It's like they were all like the Vietnam War was going on, and half these bands, most of these bands were singing about all the atrocities in Vietnam, anti-authoritarian, all this crap. And it's like, we're listening to music that's saying the same stuff. It just sounds a little heavier. And it's like, what?
It got brought up one time in a conversation with him. It was like, why can't you listen to bands like old bands like Frank Sinatra? Have you ever done the research on Frank Sinatra? Crap, blatantly. Did he put out good music? Sure, but like.
Yeah, well, so like my grandma got mad at me one time about this music. She might be the only one that was a little weird about it, but she's like a big Johnny Cash fan.
Yeah,
and it's like, go read Johnny Cash's lyrics. Like, I think he has one song where he talks about like shooting at cops because of like racism and stuff.
I think it's a different time though as well, because we talk about go and read about these people. You couldn't do that back then. You couldn't go and read about Johnny Cash's background. You couldn't go read about Frank Sinatra's background. All you knew was their music. It was very surface level. And so like coming from their point of view, right? Everything that they see on the news and stuff like that, because there was literally news reports about the emo scene. There was news report about the straight edge scene, the hardcore scene, and like the hardcore dancing and stuff like that, how aggressive it was and how people were there just fighting, and they'd show kids coming out with cuts on their heads from being hit. And that's what they knew as it related to us, And so I can see where they were coming from, but you guys are right. If you actually go and look up and read the background and history about all that stuff, which we can do now, it was the same thing in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
You go to a hardcore show, you get banged up because that's what you signed up for. You go to a Frank Sinatra show and they double cross him, you're going to end up dead by the mob.
Right.
Okay. It just blew my mind. Even the vocalist for Cannibal Corpse. I don't know if you guys know much about him.
Corpse Grinder.
Yeah. So when he's not touring, he actually goes and reads children's books to like terminal cancer kids.
Oh yeah.
What he does in his spare time. And you're like, I would never picture that because you think Cannibal Corpse and like how vile they are in their music. Yeah.
Well, there's a hardcore festival. I don't think they do it anymore, but what is it, For the Children, where they like everyone brings toys and that's part of like your entry fee is toys.
Cannibal Corpse used to host that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Cannibal Corpse hosted For the Children because it was ran by the singer for Zabalba. Well, at least
that might not be the one. They used to do a toy drive though every year, if I remember.
Yeah, there's a place to do Toys for Tots, and they actually will say like, you buy a ticket and you have to buy a toy to get in.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be crazy, but you have to buy a toy to get in. There's things like that where I'm like, I can get way behind these bands that they have their hardcore mentality, but they actually have a bigger picture mentality of like, let's do something good for the community.
Yeah. So. Well, honestly, I think that's a big part why I've continued to enjoy this scene and be a part of it is there really is a sense of community and brotherhood, and they sing about real things, real issues, real stuff that's going on, and I respect that. Music is an art form, and art's supposed to be expressing how you feel about stuff, and if you're just singing generic songs about generic things, to me that feels a little fake, right? And that was a big draw into this music, even as a kid, was and maybe that came from an appreciation of the older music that I listened to with my parents, because it was the same thing for them, right? They had real issues in that time of life, and they sang about it. And so this, the music that we listen to nowadays is the same thing. It's real issues, it's real problems, it's a real fight, and that speaks to me. I like that.
It's funny, Kyle, you talking about your mom. Your mom was actually a really big reason why I was able to actually continue to get into the scene. I don't know if you know this, but the only reason my parents would actually let me go to some shows was because your mom was with us and driving us to them.
Little did they know that she was the foulest one in the car too. So.
But like the first show that I went to this was the weirdest lineup. Tiger Army, Billy Corgan, and Stray Light Run. The University of Utah put it on. That is the most diverse bill that you can come across, but freaking fun. The next show I went to was 30 Seconds to Mars and Seether with you and your mom and a couple of our other buddies. And we stayed for 30 seconds and we didn't stay for Seether because I couldn't see Seether. My mom would not let me see Seether. So, yeah. So that was the next one I went to. But if it wasn't for your mom and driving us and stuff like that, like, first of all, I wouldn't be in this music scene the way that I am. Second of all, I don't know if we'd be the level of friends we are because of all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, just think about like all the times we spent in my basement just blasting music.
No, I mean, we would sit there, we'd blast music. I remember you used to have, it was like before an iPod. What was that black MP3 player you had?
I don't remember.
It wasn't even a Zune. It was just like one of the first MP3 players that could hold more than like 10 songs. Yeah. And you had like a playlist of like 100. And we'd sit there and we'd play pool. We'd turn it on shuffle and we'd be like, this is so-and-so band. This is so-and-so album kind of thing. And we would just talk about music for hours, just doing that kind of stuff.
I don't miss the struggle of putting a Discman in the front of my hoodie and running like out my sleeves to sit like this in class.
Yep.
Yeah, and you had to do you remember when like the cool Walkmans came out that actually you could run with because they wouldn't skip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they always did eventually.
I think me and Trevor, we've been friends longer. What was it? It was probably like end of elementary school, right? That we started
somewhere
hanging out and listening to music. But I remember meeting Josh. So you were a junior, Josh, right? And I was a sophomore, and we took
auto.
It was auto, right?
Auto shop.
So I remember walking into the class and going to the back, and I see this kid. And Josh, you were one of the biggest scene kids in the entire world, man. You would never guess it. Seeing it out. But you had like long hair and stuff, right? And like tight jeans and the hoodie. And I remember you were in the back, just like headbanging. And I was like, "Oh, what are you listening to?" And you were listening to the first Devil Wears Prada album. And I was just like, all right, that's it. We're friends. Cause like I was a huge fan of Devil Wears Prada. And it was just,
You had black hair and like a blonde streak through it.
Yeah.
Cause I remember seeing you in Auto Shop. We talked like briefly. And then I saw you at It Dies Today. And I just remember seeing like both of your hands flying. And I'm like, oh, this is a kid from my Auto Shop class.
So can I tell you, after you probably kind of started to talk to Josh in that class, you pointed him out in our high school, and it must have been like the day you did this, but you hair extensioned your bangs and you came with a scarf and the tightest jeans I've ever seen. When Kyle says there was no bigger scene kid, there was no bigger scene kid in our school. And I was like, that's the kid you're talking about? And yeah, sure enough, we fast became friends.
So a funny story about the extensions, back on the restriction with my parents. I would go get coffee from the gas station, like Jamocha coffee or whatever, with like, I don't know, a caramel latte, whatever. So I thought they were really good. And I liked the caffeine. And my mom caught me drinking it like twice. And she's like, I catch you drinking that thing again. You're going to regret it. Well, there was a morning where I decided to take that Lincoln Town car up to the V and got it stuck. And I like hit something underneath. And I remember coming to a stoplight and the car tried to take off. I didn't know what I did, what happened. So I had to drive it home. So I drove it home. As soon as I got in the driveway, I forgot I had coffee in my hand. And my mom looked right at me and she goes, "You're going to pay the price for this one." So she took me to Smith's by our house. We bought 2 boxes of stripper, which is basically strips all of the pigment out of your hair. Because at the time, I had long hair. It was dyed black. I had red and blonde in it at one point. And she was like, "We're dyeing your hair back to its normal color." So she stripped it twice, and then we bleached it twice, all in one day. My hair was so brittle, it was just breaking off. And so anyway, so like I ended up just having to cut it off, and I was really pissed because like for me to grow my hair that long took kind of a while. And so I was like, someone gave me I can't remember who gave me the idea. It was like, "Why don't you just do extensions so it grows back?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna do it." I had that girl, Marjan, she put the extensions in my hair. That's
Nice.
actually how I ended up meeting all those, a bunch of my friends from Ogden. That was their first impression of me. I had extensions.
Because they tried to beat you up or what?
No, I'm sure they wanted to. I'm sure they still do. So
Yeah, no, so we were friends before, Kyle, but my first music introduction with you was at that same friend whose dad would just kind of let us run the house. He gave us permission to go out and they had a shed out back. At first, our friend said, "We can just do what we want in here." So we started spray painting the walls and doing all this stuff. And you come over and you're like, "Check this out, guys. These guys say the F word like 3 times in this song. I bet you can't find out where." And you put in Atreyu's first album they have.
but Suicide Notes and Butterfly Kisses.
That's
Yeah.
the one. And you play something. Okay, tell me where he says it. And I was like, there. He's like, "Nope." And that's what we started doing. So that was our introduction into basically just sitting around listening to music and just kind of talking about and messing
It
around
was
with
like-
that kind of stuff.
that first Atreyu album and the first like Avenged Sevenfold album.
Sound of the Seventh Trumpet.
Yeah, those were banger of albums, man, back in the day.
They were solid.
That's kind of where I think you find so much diversity. Like, okay, like if you probably would never go see Avenged Sevenfold, but if you found out they were playing something off Sound of the Seventh Trumpet, you'd be like, "Okay, I'll show up for that."
Yeah.
I might make everyone mad that's
Yeah.
showing up for like, I don't know. I don't even know what their later albums are called because they're not worth mentioning. But
Yeah, there's like a few bands like that because I feel that way about AFI. I'm not a huge fan of their newer stuff, but if they came back and played some of their older things, because that was a big gateway band for me as well.
so
Yeah.
they did. They played stuff off of Shut Your Mouth and Open Your Eyes, Black Sails in the Sunset, and Sing the Sorrow.
That like Halloween. What's the Halloween EP?
Oh, dude, All Hallows EP.
All Hallows EP. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
They didn't play anything off of that, but they did play some old stuff, and it was cool because like the crowd was mostly like respected. You had a lot of people there that were there to see the old stuff, or like not old stuff, their newer stuff. You know, Davey Havoc came out and was like, "We're gonna play something, you know, for this girl that got us our first show out here in the '90s," and they announced the song name, and it was off "Shut Your Mouth and Open Your Eyes," and I'm like, "They're gonna play it. We're going nuts!" And over their heads.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think I had a little bit of introduction in junior high towards these bands like Thrice, Under Oath, The Bled, Armor for Sleep. But at that time, YouTube wasn't really a thing. It was more MySpace, and I wasn't old enough to go to these shows. So I would have to like be friends with somebody that could go to that show or had an older brother that went to that show and had the CD. So I got some burnt CDs all through junior high, but I never really got to experience going to a show until I was out of junior high, besides that park show.
Yeah.
In high school, sophomore year, me and a few other friends decided to do what was called Jake Fest. It was in memory for a friend that had passed away in 2005, literally the year it was like the week we were graduating from junior high to go to high school. He was killed in a car accident, first freak accident thing, and it was just like a big mess. But one of the big things from him that he loved was music. You know, he was always walking around with like Warped Tour compilations in his ears, and he was more on the punk side of things, like Dropkick Murphys, Big D and Kids at the Table, things like that.
Yeah.
This one friend I had was really into ska. So it was kind of like, let's get together and just have a bunch of bands play. So the first year, we had ska bands, punk bands like Taylor Flandrill's old band. I can't remember what they were called.
The Reply. I
The
have those
Reply,
albums
right.
still.
Right. So we had like punk bands. We had like some weird metal bands that didn't even have vocals. There was just music. And then like I think my band that year covered Avenged Sevenfold to Wake and Avenged. No, not To Wake and Avenged. To Wake. Is it To Wake that did?
I don't remember the
There's
name.
too
I know
many
what song you're
bands that
talking
have-
about.
It's like their
there's too many
popular
bands.
ones. Yeah, so I kind of made friends that way. And one of the friends ended up dating this girl that's your guys' age. And I became friends with her older brother throughout my sophomore year. So I don't know if you guys remember this. Remember, they used in lunch, they did what was called a guitar off. And you guys remember Tyler Sapp at all?
Yeah.
He walks up in these weird pajamas and his face is painted all white. And he's like up there singing some weird like Marilyn Manson song. It's just super weird. Anyway, there was this other kid named Andrew, and he brought this guitar. And I had some friends that were like, "You should just go up and just play." So I actually took Andrew's guitar. I flipped it upside down in front of the whole school, and I played on it or whatever. And I ended up making friends with Kurt Michelson through that connection, and he had an older brother that was in a band called Murrieta. I don't know if
remember
you guys
Murrieta.
like see them or play them, but they all kind of shared members and were friends with bands like Day 2 or Clifton or I Am the Ocean. And he kind of sent me down a rabbit hole of like trying to always find the next band. And I remember going over to his house, and that was when I finally got my hands on translating the name, the Seosin EP. And I put that in, and I was like, where can I find more of this? And he was like, go through my old iTunes, man. And I just searched for hours, just going through, just trying to find stuff, because his brother and him were always going to those shows.
Yeah.
So that was my sophomore year. And then my junior year, I started getting more into heavier music. I think that's kind of what started my rabbit hole into trying to find bands that nobody knew about that everyone should know about.
Yeah, I think we all kind of went down that at one time. If you were ever the one to bring the new band, it was always kind of like a badge of honor kind of thing.
And then it ended up with us going to like, how many shows do you guys think we've all been to together?
A lot.
I mean, it felt
There
like
was some
2-3
we were
times a
going
month.
like we were going a couple times a week sometimes towards the end.
For a while, it was almost every weekend, like whether it was Battle of the Bands in the venue or then going out to Utah State Fairgrounds or Saltaire or like
There was always
Ice
something at Avalon.
Park Show. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
there was always some band or there was always something going on you could go do. But that's just like what we live for.
So let me ask you guys this last question. Why are you still in it now?
That's a good question.
That one. I'm going to let Trevor answer that one first.
I'll be honest, I fell out of it for a while. I would say around 2013. So I had just gotten married, starting to get like done with school and stuff like that. I fell out of trying to find new bands, right? I started just to put on repeat the stuff that I had grown accustomed to. Quite frankly, the best stuff that's ever been put out, like nothing's going to beat 2007 through 2011 type of albums. There was a long time where I don't know, became easy just to listen to that instead of trying to find something new. And I also was listening to softer stuff because I've got 3 little girls and it always sucks you back in. We were talking about this during Misery Signals. A well-timed breakdown solves all problems. So it always sucks you back in when you least expect it. And I mean, we've continued to stay friends. And so whenever you guys were around reminiscing about all this stuff brought me back to simpler times without 3 little girls. So
What about you, Josh?
I think it's for a couple of reasons. Like for the kid aspect, like I get in a conversation with a buddy of mine all the time. He's like, I never want my kids to get into hardcore, but like, because there can be a lot of negativity that can come with it, like 100%. But I think there's always negativity for everything that you do, and I think the thing that makes me want them to like know it, I kind of think in my head, like, it'd be really cool to see Lily do gymnastics and that'd be sweet. But it'd be way sick if like she was a front man for a band screaming or whatever, because I would rip every single person apart the entire thing, just
Listen, dude,
just like pumped,
your daughter crowd killed our kids when she was 4 years old. So you've done it right.
I see that and I'm like, don't want to have the ego part about it, but I'm like, have that aggression, have an outlet, make it a positive impact for as long as you can until you can find, where you fit in. I think as far as like if it was like DIY hardcore, I won't dive way into it, but I had a very close friend of someone I consider a brother that was killed in 2014, and I think there's a lot of responsibility that's held on a lot of close friends' shoulders that are part of that really try to keep the scene from making the same mistakes and same pathways that we made. Because there was a long time for going to shows in 2007, 2008, where it was very crew driven and very like you couldn't show up to a show unless you had at least 10 friends with you. And it's not because you couldn't fight by yourself, but you couldn't fight 15 people by.
Right.
At this point now, because I'm 33 now, most kids now that are going to shows are half my age. I go as like the older crowd now, just to kind of see if everyone's still having fun. Like, it's not my scene, I don't control it, but it is kind of cool to see how it's progressed. And it's just like kind of one of those, like, I guess, feel good things to like, I think my friend now would be like, this is what we were trying to do. Like, this is awesome. And so it's like trying to make sure it stays on that same track with like, no, whatever this is, keep doing that. So,
what about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I kind of fell out of it a little bit too. But that whole time that I wasn't as into the scene or into the music, I always felt like a part of me was missing. And, we talk about these thousands of shows probably combined between us that we've been to. 1,000 might be a lot. I don't know. I'm not good at math.
We'll call hundreds.
I know people have easier lives than me. They have harder lives than me or whatever. To me, my life is mine. And, the level of passion and realness and authenticity with this music and, the lyrics and some of the words that have been sung in these songs that, really cut deep to you. And, I've been to a couple shows that I remember in high school, going through stuff that I was going through. And it's like a borderline spiritual experience for you, like you get this like feeling of fulfillment in your life when you're watching a band that is singing about something that's real to you and makes sense to you. And that like imprinted on me about the importance of what this scene is and what this music is. And, getting back into it as I've gotten a little older, it's still relevant and good today because you get older and like these problems don't go away. You learn how to cope and deal with them more as you get older, but they don't go away. And it's that same, I'm finding now as I'm 32, about to turn 33, that I'm finding that same outlet, that same relationship with this scene and this music that I had when I was a kid. And there are different problems. I try to be an adult and I've got responsibility, but it's like, it's different problems, but it still speaks to me in the same way, and, just talking about the scene and stuff, it's really cool to see where it's gone, the shows that I've been to lately, and even in a different state, like what Josh was saying, to see some of these younger kids that, that may or may not have a harder time than you're having, still be able to go there and express themselves and have fun and outlet a little bit of aggression, which, in my opinion is healthy, especially for guys. It makes me proud of the scene that I grew up in and the experiences I've had. And, there is a sense, I remember the dumb stuff we did at some of these shows, and you look back and maybe regret some of that. So, I think it's a good learning lesson, especially as my kids, start to get interested in this. My 7-year-old is a pretty big fan of this music. And I think I've mentioned it before, but he practices stage diving over the couch in our living room, and I'll play like when this Stick to Your Guns tour got announced today, and I threw on a couple of their songs, and during one of the breakdowns, like he ran up and tried to like Spartan kick me. And like, I was just laughing and stuff and, but I want him to be able to know that there is like a cool, inviting, inclusive scene to where he can go and no matter who he is, when he gets older, feel welcomed and have a healthy outlet. And, if he's fortunate enough to learn and be able to play an instrument and, maybe play in a band and the cool experiences you get from that. And it's such an important and cool piece of art. I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but it is important to me. But I've talked to my wife about, because she was telling me that it was announced today that like Taylor Swift is referenced in the government with the economy and stuff, about how her Eras tour has actually like boosted the economy.
Yeah.
And I look at like that and I'm like, yeah, that's cool and all. But like when I look at the music that I grew up in or that I listen to now, it's like it is culturally important to the history. You look back at the influence of rock, punk in the 80s and 90s and hardcore now, and it's like, this is a real tangible thing that has affected culture across the world. And it's something I'm proud to be a part of now,
No, I like that, and I appreciate everything you guys are saying. And obviously, it brought us together. We wouldn't be sitting here doing it without this kind of music and everything like that. So I'm super grateful for our experiences, these bands, this music, the scene, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm looking forward to really getting back involved. It was a fun time of life.
Yeah.
Being as involved as we were.
Well, and we might have some of the dumbest takes that people have heard about this music, but it comes from a good place.
Oh, we might be so far off coming from our Utah bubble.
But we've been around the block,
I remember going to shows in pants, but then bringing gym shorts to mosh and then changing back into pants to leave.
Yeah.
Because you had to look the part, you seen, kid.
Yeah. Seriously.
Oh, man. No, good stuff. Well, I hope that this episode people find interesting and like this kind of stuff. If you do like it, please let us know. I think we'll probably try to do this a little bit more often. We're still going to talk about bands. We'll get back on bands next week. Josh is going to lead us through From Autumn to Ashes. Fat A. We're going to get going on them. So that'll be our band next week. Catch y'all later.